How's it going, great students? Welcome back to Life Groups and our series, Belief and Practice. It's good to be seen by you again, and if I'm with your group tonight, it's good to see you. As always, before we really jump in, go ahead and pause and pray together using the prompts on screen, and then we'll get started. All right, we are continuing discussing the attributes of God, and last week we looked at God's incommunicable attributes, which are attributes that God alone has and that humanity does not. And tonight we are talking about God's communicable attributes. And so for our question and answer, the question is, what are God's communicable attributes? And our answer is that God's communicable attributes are those attributes that he has that he also shares with humanity, that he creates humanity with the capacity to have as well. Go ahead and pause here and list off some of those attributes again. Even if it's a review from last week, go ahead and list off what are some attributes that God has that humans have as well. Okay, you have maybe said many of these, but a list of these attributes are things like knowledge, wisdom, faithfulness, love, goodness, grace, mercy, patience, holiness, righteousness, power, and honor. These are attributes that God and man have, and that man is supposed to imitate God in. When we imitate God in these attributes, we reflect his glory, his character to creation. If you have a room with only a small light in it, it's not going to be very bright, it's going to be dim, and there will be corners and parts of the room that you can't see. But if you place a mirror, or maybe multiple mirrors in that room, those mirrors will reflect that light into the corners and the dim places. This is what we are supposed to do as God's image bearers when we reflect and try to embody these attributes. We reflect God's glory and goodness into creation. I want to take the opportunity in this video to highlight man's goodness and glory. There are two ditches that we can fall into when talking about humanity's wickedness or humanity's goodness. I've heard plenty of messages where a speaker will passionately tell the crowd that they are beautiful and worthy of love and that God would give anything to be with them. And while there's some truth to this, it undermines the reality of our sin, our brokenness, our worthlessness, and even ugliness outside of Christ. Romans 3:10 says that all of humanity has gone astray and become worthless. This sort of message is dangerous because it undermines our rebellion against God and our desperate need for his grace. On the other hand, sometimes we can get so focused on our sin and depravity that we can lose sight of the fact that God originally created man to be good and to be the pinnacle and glory of his creation. I definitely personally lean toward emphasizing sin and our wickedness and our brokenness and our need for God. So tonight I want to balance that out and talk about the glory of man, especially as a new creation in Christ. You were created to be glorious by reflecting and imitating God's glory and being glorious yourself. Now, we do have to be careful because we can easily become vain and self-righteous and self-obsessed and fall into this ditch where God is just a self-help guru here to help us live our best life now. So we have to keep balance in these things. Go ahead and pause here and read the scriptures on screen and then come back here and I will briefly discuss them. So first, in Genesis 1, God makes man in his image. The text repeats the word created 3 times when talking about man's creation. And then it says that we are created in God's image. It used that word image twice. The rest of the chapter includes a calling and command to rule the earth. So Genesis 1 speaks of man as a unique, special creation, and it also tells us that God gives man a special calling by entrusting him with ownership and authority over the earth. This whole event and language in Genesis 1 that's used describes it's radically unique language compared to other elements of creation. And the way Genesis 1 talks about God creating the plants and the animals and the waters and the land and even the stars and the moon and the sun. God says nothing quite like this about other parts of creation. Humanity here is crowned with glory and honor and authority. Moving on, Psalm 8 says this explicitly. In this chapter, David is wrestling with man's place in the universe. On the one hand, he recognizes how low man is compared to God. In verse 4, he says, "What is man that you are mindful of him and that you care about him?" But in the next verse and beyond, he recognizes that God has given man glory and honor and put the rest of creation under man's care. Next, Proverbs chapter 20, verse 29, and then chapter 31 describe glories and graces that are particular to men and particular to women. I didn't have you read this, but in the New Testament, you have passages like 1 Peter 2:9, which says, "But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light." Students, as humans, especially as those in Christ, you are royalty. You are God's special creation. You are treasured and blessed and called to glory. You ought to seek excellence and greatness in everything you are and do to the best of your abilities, and do it to reflect God's attributes, his goodness and his wonder to the universe. You'll have to endure more C.S. Lewis and Chronicles of Narnia here. Be thankful, because I thought about quoting a much more lengthy and difficult passage from another Lewis book, Perelandra, so you're welcome. In The Magician's Nephew, the story of the creation of Narnia is told, and through circumstances that occur earlier in the book, a married couple comes from our world and is transported into Narnia just after its creation. The man is a driver of a horse and carriage, and the woman is his wife. Aslan makes them the first king and queen of Narnia, and this is that story. "My children," said Aslan, fixing his eyes on both of them, "you are to be the first king and queen of Narnia." The cab driver opened his mouth in astonishment, and his wife turned very red. "You shall rule and name all these creatures, and do justice among them, and protect them from their enemies when enemies arise, and enemies will arise, for there is an evil witch in this world." The cabbie swallowed hard 2 or 3 times and cleared his throat. "Begging your pardon, sir," he said, "and thanking you very much, I'm sure, and my wife does the same, but I ain't no sort of chap for a job like that. I never had much education, you see." "Well," said Aslan, "can you use a spade and a plow and raise food out of the earth?" "Yes, sir, I could do a bit of work like that, since I was raised that way." "Can you rule these creatures kindly and fairly, remembering that they are not slaves like the dumb beasts of the world you were born in, but talking beasts and free subjects?" "I'd see that, sir," replied the cabbie. "I'd try to do the square thing by them all." "And would you bring up your children and grandchildren to do the same?" "It'd be up to me to try, sir. I'd do my best, wouldn't we, Nellie?" "And you wouldn't have favorites either among your own children, or among the other creatures, or let any hold another under, or use it hardly." "I never could abide such goings on, sir, and that's the truth. I'd give 'em what for if I caught them at it," said the cabbie. All through this conversation, his voice was growing slower and richer, more like the country voice he must have had as a boy, and less like the sharp, quick voice of a city man. "And if enemies came against the land, for enemies will arise, and there was war, would you be the first in the charge and the last in the retreat?" "Well, sir," said the cabbie very slowly, "a chap don't exactly know till he's been tried. I dare say I might turn out ever such a soft one. Never did no fighting except with my fists. I'd try, that is, I hope I'd try, to do my bit." "Then," said Aslan, "you will have done all that a king should do. Your coronation will be held presently, and you and your children and grandchildren shall be blessed, and some will be kings of Narnia, and others will be kings of Archenland, which lies yonder over the southern mountains." Later on, crowns are made for the king and queen, and then we read this. "When the crowns had been cooled in the river, Aslan made Frank and Helen kneel before him, and he placed the crowns on their heads. Then he said, 'Rise up, king and queen of Narnia, father and mother of many kings that shall be in Narnia and the isles of Archenland. Be just and merciful and brave. The blessing is upon you.' Then everyone cheered or bayed or neighed or trumpeted or clapped its wings, and the royal pair stood looking solemn and a little shy, but all the nobler for their shyness. Lewis communicates well in this story the humility, but the nobility as well of humanity. This is the standard that we ought to aspire to. Scrolling TikTok is not glorious. Being captured by the lust of the flesh is not glorious. Binging Squid Games is not glorious. Playing hours and hours and hours of video games is not glorious. Stop letting the world, the flesh, and the devil rob you of a glorious life reflecting God's glory. Go do something creative and difficult and intelligent. By God's grace, be full of love and loyalty and kindness and holiness and zeal. Rule and compassion and joy over the little slice of creation and the little stretch of time that God has given you here on this earth. Be a mirror that reflects the glory of God into a place it has not yet gone. Bring God's glory in new ways into agriculture or technology or engineering or architecture or politics or economics or music and into the lives of the people around you. Students, it is a gift and an honor to share any attribute with God. Animals and plants and stars do not share these attributes like we do. We are God's special creation. Go from here tonight and maximize these attributes that you share with the very creator of the cosmos for his glory. That's all I have for you tonight. I have some questions and challenges to end as always. May God bless you. I'll see you next time.